Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to Retail Leadership Summit Online, third day. For this session, the Innovation Playbook, Building a Culture of Innovation and Experimentation for Greater Customer Experience. I've got a fantastic lineup with me today, and it's my privilege to moderate this session. Before that, I would like to share some views. Just now, we had this initial panel before us. And I do recollect Hari Menon talking that during the pandemic, BigBasket did not one, but over 62 innovations, most of them overnight. Not just BigBasket.com, all businesses were compelled to think out of the box and innovate for various reasons. The most fundamental among them being survival and relevance. And the most important among them is customer experience, because ultimately you will have to serve the customer. Innovation is closely linked with experimentation. Without experimentation, innovation cannot exist. To successfully innovate, companies need to make experimentation an integral part of their everyday life. Even when budgets are tight, even when innovation has become imperative, many businesses struggle to do it. Not because they don't have the means, but because they don't have the culture. Creating such a culture means creating an environment where employees' curiosity is nurtured. Research has found that businesses with a culture of innovation and experimentation are more agile and adaptable and are able to deal with crisis better, and in fact are able to find opportunity in adversity. They are able to achieve constant improvement in product and service quality, better efficiencies, etc. The ultimate beneficiary of all this is the customer. With this, I am opening the session, and I would like to start with my dear friend Mohit here. And this question is for all, because I want a succinct answer from all of you. As you know, it is an imperative to have the culture of innovation. But do you think there is need for innovation in retail today? Mohit, we'll start with you. The need for innovation.
Hitesh, I think you need to clarify there are two Mohits here.
That's right. Sorry. My bad, yeah. Apologies. It is Mohit Dhanjal to start with, and that's why you answered Mohit.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, Mohit. I trump you in this case.
Not at all. Please go right ahead.
My screen is frozen.
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. So thanks, Hitesh. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think, one of the fundamental constants that have been part of our retail journey is that consumer preferences, consumer behavior is always changing. And what the pandemic has shown us is that the pace of change has only accelerated. And therefore, if we want to stay relevant as retailers, it is important that we also evolve and change along with our customers. Because end of the day, I mean, we provide a service to a customer, a platform to interact. And if you're not relevant, then why are we there in the business? So a short answer to a very pertinent and important question. Yes, we have to evolve. There's no other way. Otherwise, we'll not survive.
Yeah. Now I'll go to Mohit Khattar. Mohit, your views on this, the need for innovation.
So my views are pretty similar to Mohit Dhanjal's, but let me explain it possibly a little differently. I mean, as retail businesses, we are the core reason why we exist is the customer. And we all know how dynamic customer behavior is in general. Not just in the retail industry, but across industries, if you were to look at it, the customer is continuously evolving. The customer's awareness level of different things is kind of going up. The customer's relationship with food is evolving. The customer's relationship with technology is evolving, and so on and so forth. So if the core reason why we exist, which is the customer, is continuously changing and evolving and becoming smarter, as retail businesses that cater to this customer, we can't stay in the same place, can we? So the answer is pretty clear that unless we change and evolve at the same pace or maybe faster than how the customer is changing, we would possibly be, dinosaurs. So, and obviously we wouldn't like to be there. So,
sure, Mohit. Avnish, your views on the same, please. You're muted, Avnish.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't think there is anybody who will disagree with the need for innovation, Hitesh. I think that's a given. I would just add that, in our case, we have an existential need to innovate because of the problem we have tried to solve right from the beginning, right from our birth. That we have tried to move people to buy jewelry online first and then through other means. So that itself is such a big problem that we have like taken a big bite of a problem. That it's been in our DNA that we had to innovate, otherwise we wouldn't survive and we wouldn't have a business. So in that sense, the pandemic was just a new chapter of that same journey, but it's essentially something which is hard-coded that if we don't do that, then we will be wiped off literally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Avnish. Lars, welcome to the panel. I think you are attending live from Singapore, I suppose. Your views on the same, Lars, please.
Hi everyone, thank you Hitesh. Yes, live from Singapore, and pleasure to meet you all virtually and pleasure to be on this panel here today. I think I can only echo everyone. When it's evident that innovation is needed, I think the history has shown it, not only in retail, but who doesn't innovate doesn't survive. I mean, we have so many cases within our industry and within other industries. If we look at the Nokias of this world, or if you look at the Blockbusters of this world, I mean, it's there's just so many actual cases that show who doesn't innovate will just simply not make it. And I fully agree with Avnish that COVID has just been another chapter that has shown how important innovation is, and that has shown how fast and how important agility and speed and pace in innovation can be. And one additional item that I would like to repeat here, it all starts with the consumer, right? And the consumer preferences. And it's, a lot of times you hear retail is evolving. It's not retail that is evolving. We are reacting. The customer is evolving, right? So we need to innovate because customer behavior, customer preferences, customer point of view changes. So we need to adapt accordingly. But yeah, in general, I can only agree to everything what was said before.
Thanks, Lars. I would now like to go to Avnish again. Avnish, if I have to say, the business model that you started with itself was an innovation, and for the industry, the way I see it. And what role does leadership play? Because I think since you had the early mover advantage also when you started, and the model itself was an innovation, as I said. So what role did leadership play to change that culture? Because to sell this concept also as an innovation must have been a challenge. So if you can throw some light there, about the leadership and the culture part.
See, I think, Hitesh, that everything stems from the leadership because, like you said, right, innovation is a cultural thing, right? It is kind of established on a strong bedrock of what kind of culture you create, right? So in that sense, I think it has everything to do with leadership, right? And I'll give you some examples. One of the things which we have learned and we have tried to institutionalize in the organization is to make people comfortable with failure. How the organization or how leaders or how managers react to failure is a very essential thing, right? It's like the way a parent reacts when a child, makes a mistake, right? If you react badly, then whatever you say, they know that next time they will be very, very careful of doing anything which could lead to failure because they know that the reaction will be bad and there might be a risk, right? There is going to be a lack of psychological safety in that sense. So that is just one example of how leadership is extremely important in setting the tone, right, for innovation. And, everything other than that also, right? The kind of teams you create, goal setting is such an important thing, right? Which comes from the leaders. When we think of CaratLane, because of the nature of our business, right, it being digital, we think of it as very, close to the army, for example. In the army, they have this concept of commander's intent, right? Which means that the goal is very clear, but the path is left to the soldiers, right? So that in the heat of battle, they don't have to check with the high command as to what to do if plan A doesn't go right? So all of that, right, setting the goal clearly and ensuring that people are empowered to take their own paths, right, to the goal also comes from the leadership. So I would say that everything comes from the leadership, right? If you have to really build a truly innovative culture in the organization.
Thanks, Avnish. Mohit Khattar, this is for you, Mohit. The role. So how do you manage change and mindsets? This would be my next question to Mohit Khattar. That, as Avnish also mentioned, obviously you'll have to handle people, and the biggest change is that of mindset. So how do you handle that, Mohit?
I think I just like to take this point where Avnish left off, something that he mentioned during the course of his conversation. How comfortable are you with failure, for instance? And that's something extremely critical, because when you are challenging the status quo, when you are going against the grain, you have to take people out of their comforts, out of their comfort zones. And failure is somewhere, it's bound to happen, because you are treading a path which you don't know about. How you react, or how the leadership team reacts to failure, is extremely critical. So that's something I completely agree with Avnish. I think importantly, mindsets, the kind of mindsets that we foster are, what I would call flexible mindsets, or growth-oriented mindsets, or learning mindsets, more than, it's a success-oriented mindset. It's not a success-oriented mindset. It's about what can we do better? How can we improve? To me, that's very critical. Also, I think we are not necessarily, we're not necessarily looking at big bang growth. We're not necessarily saying, I want to change the world with my product. We're not necessarily coming from there. Having a mindset which says that, we are okay even with small improvements. We are okay even if we improve incrementally. It fosters a mindset in your team that, I have to improve things one by one, one process after the other, one change after the other. Maybe, it doesn't sound as glamorous as saying, I have a big idea. But 100 small ideas also make a great improvement in your overall product or process, etc. And that's something that we are fostering. And as I said, when you come from a growth-oriented or a learning mindset, the possibilities are endless. I mean, it's like a limitless possibility. And that's something we try and encourage between our teams. And I think the last thing is that, especially in our business, we don't believe that innovation should be the responsibility of a few people. It's not the responsibility of the product development team to come back with ideas on how to improve products or how to change products. The ideas have to come from those who are close to the customer, and that could be the sales teams, it could be the marketing teams, or it could be a combination of all these teams. And I think that's again critical, that when you make your teams, ensure that you have you have a mix of people who can all contribute equally, and the ideas could come from anybody. It's not just the responsibility of very, very few individuals, because then the risk that you're parking is very, very high. I mean, you're saying that, this guy or this team is supposed to come back with that, huge idea for, let's say, next year or next season or whatever. And that's something we kind of stay away from. So, yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Mohit. Mohit Dhanjal, this question is for you. Same for the change in the mindset, and how do you manage that change? Because that's what is critical, is what we could figure out from the initial thoughts that all of you have said. So how do you manage these mindset changes?
So I think as a leader, first of all, you need to be clear that this is something that you want to do, and it all comes from a belief that what you're trying to drive, there is a deeper purpose, and the deeper purpose could be a basic need for a retailer to satisfy the needs of a consumer, for example. So it's important that we believe in the whole process, that innovation will lead to improvement, whether it's a big bang innovation or even micro improvements in efficiency that may happen. And it is actually up to the leader. The leader sets the tone in that organization. However, as we know, in most of the cases, innovation actually do not come from the leader themselves. It may come from the person who's actually managing your last mile interaction. And in most of the cases, actually, even product innovation ideas actually come from the ground. So therefore, do you have a system in your organization where you can capture these feedbacks, where you can capture these insights, and then bring them alive? I think that is very critical. And for a leader to do that, you need to be ambidextrous. So not only is it your responsibility to recognize innovation and perhaps set the tone for innovation, but also enable your team members to actually share what they have. And usually what happens is we set such tight guardrails that most of the ideas are rejected even before a person can complete the sentence. So we need to be a little more receptive, and largely, because there is a huge difference between your front end customer facilitator or the person who's managing your web page and the CEO. So it shouldn't be left to the CEO to take those decisions. Everybody should be empowered, and they can work on that. My only one word of caution is that I had seen this earlier on, maybe about 5-8 years ago, when innovation was also a big buzzword then, and while it's now become critical. But what happened is, for the sake of innovations, we used to have these projects which were like 100 different small innovation projects running. And at one point of time, it was not about what that innovation would get or what pain point you would solve. It was whether you're innovating or not. So, you can have a boiled egg from the top or the bottom, but end of the day, either way, that doesn't make a difference. So it's very critical that you also focus. So don't innovate for the sake of innovation. That's the worst that you could do.
Well said, Mohit. I'll come to that. Lars, this question is for you. What Avnish and both Mohit Khattar said, that react to failure. So there are two pillars I can see: act for success and react to failure. Now, from your perspective, it is imperative. In the first round, everybody unanimously agreed the need for innovation, and now the reaction to failure. And this is what Mohit also said. How do we, the pressure of innovation, etc. So how do we balance the both, Lars, as per you?
I think again, balancing is one thing, but giving people room to fail, I think that's first of all, one of the is a precondition that you have to somehow fulfill, and then that goes back to culture, right? And we as leaders, unfortunately, culture is nothing that we can just buy externally, right? It's not like a technology, or it's not like a new IT system that I can buy and here is my new culture in the team, right? So culture is something that needs to grow and needs to come from people. So what we can do as leaders only is really to give that room and try to nurture and try to support a certain culture that we would like to have, right? So first thing, I think it starts with ourselves. So I think there's a lot of paradigms that have to change. And I'm pretty sure all of us, we've heard things like, we've always done it that way. Why should we change? Or things are working. Why should we change, right? So I think these are the moments where we need to also make sure people challenge the status quo in order to become better, to become faster, to become more competitive, et cetera, right? To really create value, additional value for the customer. So I think those changing paradigms within ourselves is absolutely crucial. And then really giving comfort to the teams in a situation where they may fail, that's okay to fail. And what I usually try to explain is, the biggest mistake that we can do is not making any mistakes, right? So if we don't make any mistakes, we've made one massive mistake, right? So you really need to make the team and the organization understand that it's okay to fail within boundaries, right? So it's okay to fail within boundaries, because every failure is an opportunity for us to learn, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, you can't really fail, right? And there's a lot of ways how to do it. And I think if we start with ourselves, to be honest, we are not, for Swarovski, I'm not exactly target group, right? So I may not be the one who can really say what our customers need, what they want. How can we make them more satisfied, happy with our product? So I need to show that I'm not the one who knows it all. I need to show certain vulnerability, right? So here, things like reverse mentorship, for example, where I, have someone, maybe an 18-year-old digital marketing manager who explains to me the specifics of digital marketing, right? And in this conversation, in this setup, this person becomes much more confident to really also share ideas rather than, me trying to pull ideas from anyone or the organization trying to pull. I think in a lot of cases it's also the fear of, sharing anything in public because they may fail and it make them look bad. So concepts where you set up anonymous sharing platform, right? Someone can share an idea anonymous and then the organization can vote how much they like that idea. And then the ones that are getting the most votes, you can then further explore, right? And at the very end, if this idea somehow makes it, the person who anonymously shared it will then be somehow rewarded. So there's thousands of ways how this can be done and thousands of ways to somehow tackle the fear of failure. But to me, that's absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial.
Thanks, Lars. Reverse mentorship is something which is very interesting, and organizations should really study that angle of reverse mentorship and that model also, because what the example of 18-year-old digital guy teaching a CXO, I think that's the need of the hour, because that's where the truth lies, that this segment understands that particular domain much better than the oldies, so-called oldies. Pressure of innovation in the organization, room to fail, challenge the status quo, giving comfort, and changing paradigms. So all these things, I think all of you must have undergone during the COVID times. With this, I am moving to the next part of the discussion, where all these things have happened to your organizations as well, or at least some of these things. And I would really like to, know from each one of you how you have handled, or what are some of the case studies, or what are some of the innovations that you have done during these testing times in the last year, that your organization has dealt with the crisis, how you have overcome it, what is the innovation that you have done. I would like you all to share some examples. So I can start with Avnish to share some of the examples of innovation that CaratLane has done.
So Hitesh, one of, in our business, when COVID struck, right, it was a big challenge for us, because we are also an organization which is, we are not like a fully profitable organization yet, right? So money is also an extremely important thing. And when you suddenly are faced with a situation where you have so much uncertainty, it almost, becomes a situation where you are almost paralyzed, right? In the sense that what do you do now? So, more than, so in a situation like that, when you have 100 odd stores, right? And none of them are working. So you have to quickly pivot to make the most of the opportunity which is there, right? So when the COVID started, initially there was no delivery, everything was shut, then slowly delivery started, right, online, then some cities started opening up, right? So there was a gradual process. So I would say that, what has worked best for us in this situation was that all the teams, right, quickly reacted to the situation to, literally fight at the edges, right? Like whatever was available. So if I would say that if the jewelry market shrunk to 10% of the size, then we just scrambled to make sure that we were there first before anybody else to take advantage of that, right? So which meant that our digital marketing teams really, changed everything to literally start chasing customers at a pin code level, for example, which we were not doing earlier because, we never had a situation like this. To make sure that they were reaching out to more customers where people could place orders. And at the same time, you cut down your costs wherever, people could not place an order. Our logistics teams, quickly partnered with a lot of new last mile partners, because again, there was, a lot of the bigger players were not being able to deliver at that point in time. In our business, it's very important to have new collections and new launches all the time, right? That's why people keep coming back. Imagine at this point in time, how do you even do a shoot, right? So somebody like another 20-year-old, right? Lars mentioned a 19-year-old digital marketer. There was a 20-year-old. She actually got the product shipped to her house and she shot it on her family and friends to make sure the banners and mailers were done and it was sent out, right? Because there was no other way to shoot, right? You couldn't have gone to a studio and done that. Our entire retail sales team, they became telecallers in that period, right? So, I would say that the best part was that, and you didn't have to drive these actions from a central place, because everybody realized that we had to fight and literally fight for our existence, like I said initially. And I think in all of this, the best part was that because we also took care of our people, right? Like we didn't fire anybody, there was no salary cut. So in that sense, people also really rose to the occasion. And a lot of this agility was there because, people in the middle level or at the front line were quickly taking calls without worrying about, having to check or go through a process of approval. And they were just moving on with it, right? So I would say that, a lot of these small innovations which happened across the organization to make sure that every small opportunity which was available, right? Like if, for example, a small city in the Northeast was open, right? Then you quickly made sure that you just increase your traffic from that place and you started shipping. A lot of the malls were closed, right? A lot of our stores are in malls where inventory was stuck. But, in the classic Indian Jugaad style, people figured out a way to get inventory out and move it to cities where shipping was possible. We opened up, we made more stores, fulfillment centers in this time. We opened up more micro FCs in that time. We got 24-hour delivery going during this COVID period. And all of this was done by people on the ground, right? So I would say that there are possibly some 50 small things which was done by the teams to make sure that they kept the business going. And I think thanks to that, we are in a better situation today, actually, in spite of COVID. So that's what happened, Hitesh.
Yeah, Avnish, I think that was very inspiring. Like Hari Menon said, we have done 62 innovations and CaratLane has done some 50 odd small.
No, I don't know the number. I just said there are lots of small.
It can be. Yeah, it can be. I mean, see, all this, what you spoke about logistics, you spoke about the photo shoot. Now, you don't have models, but you do it on your family. And this was a fantastic idea. Yeah. That everything is closed. So I will do that photo shoot with my family members. So at least something is better than nothing. And obviously in that class and style. The sales team becoming telecaller. This is a fabulous example again of innovation. So Avnish, I think these are some very good innovations that CaratLane has done. Mohit Khattar, as far as Baskin Robbins is concerned, what innovations you all have done in the last 12 months during the pandemic, which you would like to share?
So I think our situation was pretty similar. I mean, typically for the ice cream industry, April, May, June are usually the busiest months of the year. But last year, obviously, the months were completely washed out. Shops were closed, etc. I think the first and foremost thing that we did, there was no one single big idea like what Avnish mentioned again. And it was multiple small ideas that, kind of helped us ride over the crisis. And I'll share a couple of them with you. As our stores started opening, as in the stores were not open, we got permissions in some areas to open stores, etc. The focus on online sales kind of completely shifted from offline to online because people were still wary of coming out of their houses. So we were, able to get our products completely moved onto online platforms and we were serving customers. We started moving products into housing societies. I mean, that's something that, people were buying commodities with trucks coming into their complexes. So we partnered with a couple of them. We ensured that ice creams were going into housing societies. So that was another thing that happened. Like he mentioned, sales officers becoming telecallers. They didn't become telecallers in our case, but they did become salesmen on the ground, going along with the trucks and standing there in housing societies and selling ice cream. So those are the kind of things that started happening. And as the situation started improving and as we started opening our parlors, I think the one thing that changed was we needed to inspire confidence in customers to start coming back. It was one thing to say that, oh, my stores are hygienic, but how do you kind of physically do that on the ground apart from, getting people to sanitize their hands and apart from measuring their temperature. So we installed these UV guns across all our stores, wherein every product that was touched by a staff member was then sanitized by a UV light to ensure that, you know, what the customer gets is reasonably hygienic. That was number one. And to add on to that, we started offering sanitizers, you know, sanitizer sachets to customers in case they wanted to use it on the product, so that they're completely sure that the product is, you know, even if it's touched by somebody else, it's absolutely fine. So small little things that we did. And fortunately, I think very confident that today now business is fully back to pre-pandemic levels. We are in a growth phase now. So hopefully the worst is behind us. But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Mohit Khattar. Mohit Dhanjal, for you, you know, what were the innovations that Sephora have you know, done in the last few months?
So we had to actually do two things. One was how do you look at your internal customers, and then it was about the external customers. So I'll first talk about what we did internally as an organization. Within the Arvind Group, and more so within Arvind Fashion Limited, we have a formula that we follow, which is called CCCP. And it has nothing to do with the erstwhile communist
party of.
Yeah, but it takes its essence from there, from being a, you know, having a cult formula like that. So CCCP basically stands for the first C is for care. And as an organization, we very strongly believe that if you care for your employees and you provide them a caring environment, it could be your office space, it could be your support systems, that will help in growing their confidence in what they do. So it is how do you empower them and also provide them a more humane organization that is there for them when they need it. So what we saw was that with the pandemic, we were first of all cut off with our teams because it completely caught everybody off guard. Everybody thought, you know, by 15th of April we'll be back to our offices. That did not happen. So then we had to reach out to teams and address concerns people had. So there was a website that was launched, which was all about which had various online tools which employees could access if they wanted any help. It could be from a mental help or just to talk to a colleague or understand policies and stuff like that. So this led to a lot of confidence among the team that okay, this is a bad time, but this is something that we will overcome. This confidence in turn, what it did was it empowered the teams to really think out of the box. So for now I move to, you know, what specifically in my business, Sephora it's a touch and feel business largely. It is all about beauty, and a unique differentiator is that you walk into a Sephora store and you can experience the products. So it's not that, you know, somebody will do half a face makeup for you and then only if you buy will I complete.
I think
shut. It was our teams that took on the initiative, saying that, you know, there are a lot of customers of ours who today they are not able to come. So and a lot of consumers were reaching out directly to our teams asking that where can they get their most favorite product from. So it was these employees, because of the confidence and the care provided by the organization, they said, you know what, we are sitting at home, we've got our products, we will create tutorials, we will create self-help videos. And they did this small thing. So you had a beauty advisor sitting out of Delhi who created some lovely videos about, you know, how you can still wear a lipstick and what is the right lipstick that you wear if you have to wear it with a mask, stuff like that. What is the kind of moisturizing regime that you need to follow, because if you're wearing a mask for a period of time, you know what can happen and stuff like that. So there was a lot of good stuff that happened, and you know, confident teams lead to higher performance, and that is what we saw. So you know, as the pandemic progressed, businesses were hit. Our shops were shut for the first 3 months, so there obviously was a financial and economic impact that we faced, and we, you know, had to take steps to survive. So during this pandemic, I've also changed organizations, and my earlier organization and this one are very similar, and they like any of our businesses that we all manage, they had similar problems and they took similar steps, but the manner in which that these two organizations did was very different. And so when things started coming back, which was from September, especially when retail started coming back with the relaxation of norms, there was a lot of positivity that I saw in this organization. And that was because when things were tough, and we did take tough calls, we did have to look at our complete cost structures. But there was a lot of positivity among the employees. And when things started coming back, they were right there. So, for example, Bombay opened up, and in Bombay, we have stores, in the far reaches of the place. So, for example, a store down in South Bombay, the employees for that store don't live around in South Bombay. They come all the way, maybe from Kalyan or even further out. And there were no local trains available. There were no local transport services that had initiated. But these employees were finding ways, and they said that we'll be at the store, and in order to ensure that there was their safety was taken care of, we created Team A and Team B, and we only had one team at a store for a period of 4 days, and then the next team would come in, and that's how we managed. And God willing, we didn't have any incidents. Fortunately, our teams were safe during this time and continue to practice those safe things.
Good. Yeah, sorry, Mohit.
So that was internal. Now external, what we realized was obviously consumers can't come to you, so you need to go to them. So we had to ramp up our complete online operation. So erstwhile operations, online operations with low single-digit contributors, this then became the engine for us to revive our economic growth, and therefore a lot of energies were put there, and the teams came together, because like in any typical traditional organization, when you start a new channel or a new business, you have a separate team. But what we realized is while the online team had the skill sets, they didn't have consumer understanding on what is the product and how can we deliver it to their doorsteps. So we created that, and we really needed to innovate, because traditionally we are a brick and mortar business. And so we had to really do a lot of stuff around that. So there were a lot of, so one big bang in innovation was that we really had to get our online platform up and running to perform and to meet the kind of demands that our consumers had from a brand like Sephora. So that was big, but there were a lot of other small things that really went in. And we were able to generate that. And fortunately, things are looking good now. So touch wood. So we are very confident. Teams are
good, Mohit. That was very interesting, both internal and external, and teams coming together. All these examples that you gave indeed has added a lot of value. And these are the testing times, and this is when there is the differentiation between the mass and the muscle, or the boy and the man, is all about. Lars, what innovations Swarovski has done during this pandemic time? If you can throw some light on that, please.
Sure, and I think we did quite a few things, and I think we innovated quite a few areas. Probably not 50 as Avnish or 62 as Big Basket, but there were quite a few innovations. I think along the three primary areas where you can actually innovate, which I guess is you have your products, you have your customer experience, and you have your operating model or your processes, right? So if we maybe start with the operating model or our processes, very similar to what Mohit just mentioned, the whole way of how we operate and how we work and how we communicate, right? We were forced to change that due to the fact that we were not able to go back to the office anymore and do our meetings and have our discussions. Everything was done remotely, everything was done virtually. I think that is not specific to Swarovski, but was probably one of the biggest forced changes that we all had to go through. And I think at the very end, a lot of people were actually quite surprised how well it actually works and how fast an organization can adapt to these new ways of working. Another one that is a bit more, I would say, maybe specific towards our industry is we are a seasonal business, right? And we have seasonal collection presentations towards our retail partners. So those usually would be large-scale events like a fashion show. I'm sorry, having a bit of sorry. Relatively large-scale events where we have fashion shows, where our retail partners can also come and touch and feel the product, really see the product, right? So this also had to change for the very first time to a virtual setup, right? Where we still had to find a way how our partners can really see the product to an extent that this makes them feel comfortable to place their orders, right? So that was a massive change and a drastic change. To be honest, after we've gone through it twice now with the COVID situation, we are actually considering to do it virtually for good because it has worked so well. 2 years ago, nobody would have ever thought about this. So once again, it's the situation that has only forced us to implement these changes. But at the very end, it works, and we probably should have done this a long time ago. So that's more from the business model and operating model and process perspective. When it comes to product, for us as a fully vertically integrated company and organization, of course, we can have certain, we have certain flexibility when it comes to our product. And this is a minor innovation, but like a lot of other companies, of course, we produce Swarovski face mask, right? So crystallized face mask that we are selling. So that is a product innovation born out of this situation to fulfill a certain customer need, as we originally said. And then if we look into the area where we probably have seen most innovations within the industry, I would say, it's really the customer experience, right? So, and Mohit also mentioned it, is we were all forced to move much more into the online world from an offline world that was completely shut down, right? So for us, it's not so much touch and feel only, like Sephora. For us, it's really touch and feel and properly see the product, right? Especially with crystals, it really depends how the light, falls on the product and how it breaks the light, etc. So what we did, we implemented a video in-store concept where if you go to the Swarovski website, you just have a button on the side and you can connect live to an associate in the store that has a tablet and that will try the product for you, right? And you can basically still go through your transaction while you're on this video call with a person in the store. And that has proven to work phenomenal because it's more than just photos that you can see in an online shop or on a website, right? So the person actually wears the product for you, the person actually turns the product for you. So that in-store video concept has proven super successfully. And then, of course, things like augmented reality tools, like virtual try-on for necklaces, virtual try-on for rings, for earrings, especially also in-store. People feel less confident to try anything, right? Or are not even allowed, in case of Sephora, I think, to try at the moment in store, right? So we have digital screens in the store, interactive screens, where you can basically try product virtually, right? So you see how it looks on your ear, or you see how it looks on your neck, etc., right? So these would be more from a customer experience perspective. And then last but not least is a new store concept that we have basically launched and that you can see just behind me. That was also, or that also happened during the COVID situation, basically.
Thanks, Lars. That was again very insightful, both at the internal and external level. Avnish, what is that one innovation, and this question is for all of you, what is that one innovation that you would like to do, or your organization will be doing, or would have loved to do it if given a chance today? It can be at the hindsight, or you can talk about the present or the future, but that one innovation that you have not done which you would like to do.
This is not only with respect to COVID, right, Hitesh?
No, it can be anything. Yeah, it's not respect to COVID. And if it is respect to COVID also, you can please share both the views if you have one.
No, so actually one of the things which I would say is kind of in the works, right, is to also make sure, I mentioned about 24-hour delivery, right? And I've also, what Lars mentioned, right, is the whole live thing, right? Like the live video thing. So actually live video is such an exciting space in our category, right? Jewelry. Because, a lot of people who are typically used to going and buying in the store could not do that, right? And luckily because of COVID, a lot of mindsets changed and people kind of made peace with the fact that this was also another way to buy jewelry. This has actually opened up, a lot of new use cases. And I'll tell you one of the use cases which we actually had before COVID, but it was not successful because of people not willing to try it. But now there are like this whole world of possibilities, and this is a real case that, the mom lives in Coimbatore, her daughter is in Germany, and the daughter-in-law was in Chennai. And typically jewelry is something which the family buys together, right? They all want to make sure how is it looking on you, and does it look nice or not. Now imagine in this, this global world, right, where it's no longer people spread all over the country, but they're all over the world, right? So how do you buy jewelry in such a situation, right? The physical distances are too large, right, that you can make a quick trip to Coimbatore and buy your jewelry. Because of live video, all of this has now become possible, and people have become, okay or open to trying this out and buying this, right? And the biggest change which we have seen in this has been in the smaller towns, where, even my parents who live in Ranchi have never been okay to buy online, in spite of the fact that I have worked in the digital industry for more than 12 years now. But they've all become comfortable with this. And not just the live video, but our WhatsApp-based commerce has also been extremely useful in that sense. So one area, and I would not call it just one innovation again, but the opportunity is to go after this large opportunity in the smaller towns to get people to buy jewelry and buy as a family, although their kids and their daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws have all moved to other parts of the country, but they can still continue to buy jewelry together. In fact, the problem statement we have set for ourselves, right? I told you about the goal statement, is to make sure that a 60-year-old grandmother you can take any small town in this country, can buy jewelry without any assistance. That's, like a goal. So there are small pieces, small changes which are happening on that part, right? Like you get vernacular, you have WhatsApp, you have video, a lot of changes on the UX and the UI, changes in the jewelry pricing, the way you show information. So all of that is happening. And I feel that the large opportunity which is there in small towns is now just waiting to be unlocked, at least in our industry. Thanks to all of this. Thanks,
Avnish. Mohit Khattar, for you, what is that innovation that you would have wished or you would like to do?
So I'll give you two examples. One is an innovation that we actually did,
okay,
and one is an innovation that we are still working on. So one of the innovations that we had been working on for a pretty long time, and then COVID, of course, happened in between, was introduction of more functional benefits in ice creams. And when I say this, what I mean is increasingly consumers are getting very conscious about what they put in and what they consume. People are very conscious of the calories and stuff like that. And especially, if you're an ice cream player and people are conscious about, calories and ice cream, then it becomes a bit of a problem. So this is something that we were alive to a couple of years ago when we started working on products. And the core challenge was, how do you give them a product that is as satisfying, as creamy, and as enjoyable as a full-fat ice cream is. Usually products which have lower fat or products which have lower calories don't tend to be as enjoyable. So that's something that we were working on as a team for the last maybe 2 years or so. And we finally ended up launching our products during this last year. So it's come in another brand altogether. It's not called Baskin Robbins. It's called the Brooklyn Creamery. And that's something that's been developed completely indigenously, and it's now in the market, available on all aggregator platforms, etc. So that's something we are very, very proud of, because, if you were to have that product blindfolded, you would never be able to say that, oh, this is a low-calorie product. And actually, the products do end up offering you about 60% lower calories than full-fat ice creams do. So that is one. Some of the other innovations that we are continuing to work on are again more related to, how do you offer a full food experience to consumers. So normally food is all about taste and smell and sight and so on and so forth. Whereas ice creams offer you only 2 of those parameters. So how do you offer the sense of smell, for example, in ice creams? So that's something we've not cracked yet. We're still working on it. Hopefully, maybe a few months down the road, we shall be more successful. So that's something that we are working on right now.
Fantastic, Mohit. In fact, as far as low fat is concerned, I am a propagator of low fat food. So I'll be the first person. Obviously, ice cream has been my, and this is something personal, but I can, have my dinner and lunch in an ice cream. That's how
we love you, and we love people like you.
But I love the brand, and the brand loves me. But if you look at it, my wife loves the other three gentlemen out here, and which I'm envy of. That's the problem. Sephora, Carrot Lane, and Swarovski.
Oh, I know. I pity you, man.
So that's the way it goes. Having said that, Mohit Dhanjal, I will come to you for your innovation, something that you would like to do.
One of the things that really worked well was that one of our partner brands, Benefit, created an augmented interface on Instagram. And what happened was
I think Mohit is having some issues with the connectivity. Okay,
he's back. He's
back. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes. So if you can hear me, I'll continue.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. So one of our partner brands actually had created a augmented reality filter for Instagram, which was about consumers who could see how their products would look on them. And as one of many innovations that you would do, it had got lost. Fortunately, when the pandemic hit, we had this filter with us. We were able to deploy it, and and consumers could then at least virtually try on what they really could use. So there was a low adoption rate earlier. Now we have seen a higher adoption rate. So this something worked in serendipity. However, if you ask me, I feel that if as a traditional brick and mortar company, if we had separate innovative labs on working on how do you actually bring alive your experience offline to online, maybe we would have had a better answer to a lot of things. We did run towards the end and we did play catch up, but honestly we could have had a better toolkit. So sometimes we are a little short-sighted as retailers. If things are good and a model is working, we continue to flog the same model. So we had a cookie cutter approach because what we had was working really good, and we continued doing that till what hit us, and then we had to change tracks. So while we'll continue doing build on the strong fundamentals we had, but I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. Consumer habits have changed, and now it is up to us as retailers to really catch up and then perhaps lead that wave.
Absolutely, Mohit. The cookie cutter approach that you spoke about. And that's what innovation and experimentation is all about, for a wonderful customer experience. Lars, your views on this, please.
Yeah, maybe not exactly an innovation that I like a wish list innovation, but something that I think probably all of us need to focus on even more, and that we haven't really touched on during this discussion now is to really make sure we are data driven, right? And make use of data in all the experiments that we do in order to innovate, because what we said, we need to have an experimentation culture in order to really have an innovation culture, right? So we try different things to then understand what can really lead to an actual innovation, right? And when we analyze these experiments and these things that we are trying and testing, I think it's really important that we are very, very much data driven in our decisions and really make use of things like advanced analytics, et cetera, and don't only, especially not the executives' gut, don't only listen to the gut of the management team or the leadership team or, overall the team. It's important. Is one criteria, one factor that we should always consider, should always take into account, but to really make sure that we make use of any information and data and analyze this data to properly make a decision. I think that's very important. I think it's something that we and probably a lot of other retailers and players in the industry need to make sure that they focus more on the possibility to collect data in the first place and set up any experiment and any test that they go through on data, right? And make sure they can collect data, analyze data, and then make a decision based on the data. I think that's something that I think we can focus on even more, that I wish we will focus on even more.
Sure, Lars. I do agree. Both big and small data are equally important and imperative for today's retailers. Having said that, see, I actually there are a couple of more questions, but due to the paucity of time, I would like to take one question from the audience that has come up. And the question is, as a small business owners, our resources are limited and our risk appetite is low, how can we optimize our experiments to yield greater results at lower cost? So this is a typical SME small business owner question. And who would like to answer this, with anybody from you can, take a try at this question. Yeah, Mohit.
Mohit, please.
Yeah, Mohit. Mohit, you're on mute.
So I think it's first important to understand what the issue is. What is the issue that you're trying to solve? So define the problem and define the solution, or define the end benefit that you seek from the entire process. So if you're trying to benefit a consumer in a certain way, do define what your end goal is, and then go about the process. Without having an end goal or without having the end benefit in mind, very difficult to start innovating. So I think the foremost thing to my mind is to have the end benefit that you are seeking, and of course then set a goal, whether it's cost optimization, or whether it's a better product, or whether it's longer shelf life, or whatever the benefit that you're trying to seek.
Sure, Mohit. Lars, you are also trying to say something, please.
Yeah, just to basically answer the cost concern, right? So innovation doesn't always have to come at a large cost, I think. So as we discussed previously, we all, each of us has ideas. We just have to make sure that we somehow nurture these ideas and create that culture that people share ideas, right? And give them room to develop and detail ideas and test and try and do things, right? So I think it's really important that innovation doesn't have to be expensive. I think that's also a mindset that we somehow need to change, right? It can come at zero budget, very low budget. We just have to create that culture that allows us to innovate. I think that's just one very important piece.
Sure. So one final question, which I would request all the panelists to answer in a line or so, about the innovation mantra. What, according to you, are the innovation mantras for today's retail scenario? If we can keep it for today's retail scenario, that would be nice, rather than being futuristic. But as you see your businesses, so what would be your innovation mantra? I'll start with Avnish Anand.
Yeah, so in addition to everything which we discussed, Hitesh, there's one more thing which works very well, and I think that is very important, is to invest a lot of resources in finding problems. Yeah. And we have like an army of people who do that in our organization. And, not just looking at customer feedback and reviews and NPS and CSAT, but, people study journeys, they do interviews, they talk to customers in the stores, then they go back and study the journey again. So we feel that finding the right problems, and these are small problems, right, which make a big difference, is, will just open up so many ideas for you, that then innovation becomes easy, right? And because it comes from the customer, there's a lot of buy-in already. So that is something which we try and do. And so far it has worked for us. And we are actually putting in more effort and more resources to drive that, more than what was done earlier. Thanks,
Avnish. Mohit Khattar, your innovation mantra, please.
So two things I'd say. One is don't necessarily have to look big. You can look small. You can look for smaller improvements. That's number one. And number two is that figure out a fast way of finding out what the impact is going to be. It doesn't have to be big bang researches. It can be small dipsticks. But the fastest ways to figure out the impact would also be very, very helpful.
Thanks, Mohit Khattar. Mohit Dhanjal, what about you in sense of your mantra?
So they're basically two mantras. The first one is always keep your customer at the heart of everything you do, because that's where your biggest insights lie. That's where your innovations will come from. Don't lose sight of your consumer. If your consumer is evolving, evolve along with him. Second one is A is greater than R. Your ambitions should not be restricted with your lack of resources. So ambitions need to be much larger than your resources. If you have a great idea or a great insight, or even if it's a small one, you'll find resources, but you need to have that ambition.
Excellent, Mohit. Thanks for that. Lars, your innovation mantra, please.
Very similar to Mohit, really to make sure whatever you do, you always have the customer in mind or the customer at heart, right? So being customer centric is the most important thing, because this is why we innovate. We innovate to add value to the customer's journey, to the customer's life, to the customer in general. So being customer centric and have a customer centric mindset, absolute key and absolute crucial. The other one really is to be bold and brave in making changes, because innovating means changing things and not, relying on the status quo, on what we are doing right now, but being bold and brave to make changes, knowing that it may lead to a setback first, but if we continue to evolve and to innovate moving forward, we should be in a better place or in a more favorable place. So I think those two also.
Thank you everyone. With this, I would just like to summarize: investing in knowing your problems. That was an excellent innovation thought, Avnish. Appreciate that. Mohit did speak about being small, being impactful. Mohit Dhanjal spoke about customer centricity. So did Lars. Customer centricity, customer focus. And A is greater than R. That is, ambition should always be greater than the resources. With this, gentlemen, I thank you very much for being a part of this innovation panel. And it was indeed a pleasure and a very insightful discussion with all of you. Thank you very much for being a part of this at Retail Leadership Summit 2021 online. Thank you very much.
Thank you.